Hello, how are you? And croeso to my channel. Welcome to my channel. My name is Mara, and here on this channel we discuss all things Welsh Celtic paganism, Welsh Celtic witchcraft, and Welsh Celtic spirituality, as well as just witchcraft, paganism, and spirituality in general. Now, first and foremost, I want to apologise to all of you who subscribed and watched my videos and have been commenting, asking for more, and I've just been AWOL since my first couple of videos. To be as frank and honest with you as possible, it has just been too hot. It has been too hot for me to film, and I couldn't do it. Every time I sat down to film, I kept sweating, and I was just like, this is not worth it. I'm not sweating for a YouTube video. No. But I'm back. It's getting colder. Those autumn days are drawing in. I've just got a comb randomly. Those autumn days are drawing in, and I can feel it in the air. I can feel that change. I can feel that crispness coming to the air. I'm wearing a cardigan. Autumn is my season. I'm very happy. Anyway, today we are talking Welsh Fairies. We're going to talk about Welsh fairy lore, and we're going to make sure to talk only good things about the fairies, because we don't want to offend the bwbachod of this household. So, yes, we're going to talk about fairies today. Do you believe in fairies? Quite a lot of adults don't believe in fairies, and I understand why, but I believe in fairies. And a lot of witches and pagans and spiritualists do believe in fairies. And, to put it in a historical context, most of the people of Wales throughout history have always believed in fairies. Fairy beliefs, fairy lore, and fairy faith has been a huge integral part of Wales for centuries, for absolutely centuries. If you have read Professor Ronald Hutton's book, The Witch, you might have read that fairy lore was very important to the people of Wales. So much so, I will do a video on kind of the history of witchcraft in Wales, but one thing you should know about witchcraft in Wales is that Wales as a country was virtually untouched by the witch craze. Now, we know what the witch craze or the witch hysteria was. The witch hysteria was the time that a lot of people call the burning times, even though it's kind of incorrect because not many witches were actually burned. Most of them were hanged. But the burning times, or the times of persecution that witches faced, Wales was virtually untouched by it, virtually unscathed by the entire situation. And a part of that has to do with fairies. And that's because if, say, the people of Wales, if they were to be struck by sudden misfortune, if your cow got sick, your prize-winning dairy cow got sick, or your sheep all suddenly died, or somebody left the gate open and all your chickens ran out, any misfortune like that in England, over on the Anglo side of the border, they would go, witches are to blame. That hideous woman, that Mrs. Meeks down the road, she is to blame for this. She is the one who's done this. She's a witch, and she has done this. Whereas in Wales, it was more likely for people to turn around and go, well, it must just be the fairies. The fairies must just be being mischievous. And they would devote most of their time, instead of trying to persecute someone or judge someone for these instances of misfortune, they would instead spend their time trying to kind of safe-proof their homes, safe-proof their land, and safe-proof themselves from being hit by misfortune from the fairies. So today we're going to dive into that kind of fairy faith, the fairy belief that surrounded Wales. First things first that we need to talk about is that fairies are not Tinkerbell. They are not beautiful, elegant little girls with pretty kind of lacy wings extending from their back. You know, we've become accustomed today in our modern age to think of fairies and to think of the kind of Barbie dolls that exist with the big butterfly wings, the imagery of kind of the Victorian era paintings of cute little flower fairies. And that's what we think of when we think of fairies. It's if you were to go onto the street today and go, what's a fairy, to someone, that is what they'd explain to you most probably. But that is not how the fairies of Welsh history are portrayed, are not kind of described as being. They're not just whimsical little creatures with fairy wings. Now, the fairies of Wales are a little bit more complicated to categorize and explain. I have this system of categorizing fairies of Wales, the fairies of Welsh folklore and myth. And it's a little complicated, but stick with me. It's not as complicated as it seems at first. So I categorise the fairies of Wales into two distinct groups, two groupings. Now, group one I call the corporeal, and group two I call the ethereal. So I kind of separate fairies into those two categories, the corporeal and the ethereal. Why that's confusing is because you would assume that by corporeal, I literally mean they're corporeal. You know what corporeal means, I'm assuming? It means physical, it means that it's real, it's like touchable. Just like us, we are corporeal beings. We are solid, corporeal, physical beings. And you would think that I mean that the corporeal fairies are real, physical beings. But that's not the case. That's not quite what I mean by corporeal. What I mean by corporeal is that they appear, present, and express themselves as corporeal beings to our mortal eyes. When we look at them, they look and seem like corporeal beings. Whereas the ethereal fairies, the second category, don't seem human or physical or corporeal in any sense. They are very much spectral and they are very much spiritual in nature. So the corporeal fairies are the first grouping, and that's what we're going to talk about first, the corporeal subsection of fairies of Wales. Let's get into it. So category 1, the corporeal, includes certain fairies known as the Tylwyth Teg, which of course in modern Wales, to modern Welsh speakers, Tylwyth Teg, say it with me if you're trying to learn Welsh, Tylwyth Teg, Tylwyth Teg. So it's Tylwyth Teg. Sorry, I know I've gotten a lot of messages and comments from people telling me that they're trying to learn Welsh and that they're using my videos to help them. So I thought I would kind of try and help with the pronunciation. Tylwyth Teg. In modern Welsh, the word Tylwyth Teg, or the two words, it's two separate words, Tylwyth Teg, I've said that word so many times now, Tylwyth Teg is used in modern Welsh to describe fairies as a whole. It's just kind of become synonymous as a literal translation of fairy in Welsh. Fairy, Tylwyth Teg. But in the original kind of folklore of Tylwyth Teg are humanoid beings. They look very much like us. They're not small, they don't have wings, nothing like that. They look very much human, except that they might be much more beautiful. They might be taller, they might be fair-haired, usually blonde or white-haired, and they're absolutely ethereal to look at, they're otherworldly to look at, their beauty is just beyond belief, and yes, they might have supernatural abilities as well as being very, very otherworldly looking. But apart from that, they look pretty much human. They don't have pointy ears as far as I'm aware, they don't have kind of weird features or wings or anything like that. And the Tylwyth Teg, it translates to mean the fair folk or the fair family. They're one of the most common types of fairy that we come across in Welsh folklore. There's a lot of tales of the Tylwyth Teg visiting markets all around Wales, seaside markets and such. They usually reside on an island, a mystical, otherworldly island that floats somewhere in the Irish Sea, known as the Gorweddigion, or the Green Meadows of Enchantment. There's a lot of stories about that realm. It's very similar to the Irish Tir na Nog, if I'm reading it right. It's very much like that. And, yeah, they're very interesting beings because they turn up at markets, they buy things from people, and they can bestow blessings upon people that they think are worthy. Similar to them are the Gwragedd Annofn, and also the Bendith y Mamau. So Bendith y Mamau is a very interesting phrase. It's a phrase that's used a lot in South Wales, I think, to describe fairy beings, fairy people. So people that are fairy in nature. And it's a very interesting phrase because it literally translates to be blessings of the mother. So Bendith y Mamau. And it denotes almost as though there's some kind of fairy blood in them, but that they are humanoid and human-like in nature. And the stories, the folklore surrounding Bendith y Mamau and the Gwragedd Annofn very much fit with that idea of this fairy blood. The Bendith y Mamau are very likely to mix with humans. They interact with humans and even in some stories mate with humans, similarly to the Gwragedd Annofn. The Gwragedd Annofn are usually lake or river beings. They are usually very pretty women who reside on the shores of desolate lakes up in the mountains. And there's many folkloric tales all about those beings kind of meeting human men and mating with them, making children, such as the story of Llyn van Fach. So in the tale of the Lady of Llyn van Fach, she mates with and marries a mortal man, has children with him, and then the tale is very interesting. It's all about how she says, if you lay a hand on me, I will leave, and I will take all my fairy cattle with me, because fairy cattle are a big aspect of Welsh folklore as well. So yeah, I really recommend you read that story if you want to learn more about the Gwragedd Anofn or the Bendith y Mamau. It's a very integral and important tale from Welsh folklore. But yes, Bendith y Mamau and Gwragedd Anofn and Tylwyth Teg all come under category 1. Humanoid in appearance, they look like us, except possibly more beautiful. And they appear and present themselves as very corporeal and not spiritual in nature. Now, between the corporeal and ethereal, the two subsections that I've kind of formulated in my head, there is one type that confuses me that I haven't subscribed to either definition, and those are the Gwyllon. Now, the Gwyllon are wild mountain spirits. They are hag-like. They look human, but they look like hags. They look very much like what one might consider the traditional fairy tale trope of a witch. Very hag, wild hair, and ugly to look at, old. And they dance and frolic around the mountains. There's lots of folk tales about people walking around the mountains and the Gwyllon start dancing around them. And their entire magical system is basically to entice and make travellers lose their way while they're walking the mountain paths at night. Now, they kind of confuse me because you would think they fit into the corporeal side because they appear as human women, but most of the folkloric tales surrounding the Gwyllon talk about them vanishing from one spot to the other, being almost spectral in nature or ghostly. And so they kind of reside in between the corporeal and the ethereal. They appear corporeal, but they have the abilities of spectral beings in being able to vanish and disappear. And they also scream, and they seem far away even though they're right next to you, or they seem very close to you even though they're far away. So they're very strange beings, and very interesting ones too. Now, the second category is the one that kind of entices and excites me a bit more. The Gwragedd Anofn and Bendith y Mamau and Tylwyth Teg of the first category are very, very interesting beings in their own rights, and they really intrigue me. But these types, the next types, the ethereal, are ones that as a witch, as a Welsh Celtic witch, I tend to research into more and sometimes even work alongside or respect and incorporate into my ritualistic practices. And those ethereal ones are usually called Ellich. Now, the word Ellich, very difficult word to say, I'm sure, if you're not a Welsh speaker. Lots of L's, and that's the Ellich or the Ellychon. They are elf-like beings. The word elf in English might actually originate from the word Ellich, because the word elf is similar to the word el, which is an old Welsh word for spirit or ghost, and then elv, which is just elf but with the F pronounced in the Welsh way, which is v, is how we say element in Welsh, elv. And yeah, it's thought and theorised that the word elf comes from the Welsh words el and elv, and also Ellich. Ellich are usually described as being elf-like beings. They're small, pygmy creatures who, you know, they resemble what you might imagine in your head if you thought of the elves of Santa's workshop, the small, sprightly beings with pointy ears and hats and jolly-looking creatures. So the Ellich are almost always described as being like that in folklore. And then there's subcategories of Ellich that look similar to them but have different kind of traits or powers. So as well as the Ellich, there's also the Bwbachod, Now, the bubachod are house spirits, very similar to, you might know, the English brownie, so house spirit, or the Scottish brownie? Are they Scottish or English? I think they're Scottish, actually. The Scottish brownie. So, they are household fairies, similar to hobgoblins and such, from English folklore. They reside in the house and they help people who take care of their home, who clean their home, and they sometimes do little things. I often leave an offering on my hob for the bubachod of my home, and I will kind of say a little prayer to them when I'm doing cleaning and such. So I try and respect the household spirits as much as possible. As well as the bubachod, you have the Coelion. I'm trying to think off the top of my head here. The Coelion. Now, as you can imagine from the name, Coelion, they are probably the original version of goblin. Now, the Coelion are mine and cave spirits, and for miners, it is very much considered good luck for your mines who have Coelion in them, because the Coelion will help you to find rich and interesting ores and minerals and crystals and stones. And so for a miner to come across the Coelion is very fortunate luck. And so it was often seen as good luck for the miners to hear the Coelion at work. They kind of look like the dwarves from Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. They're kind of small pygmy creatures again, and they have kind of minor elements to them. They carry little hammers and pickaxes and torches and lanterns and such. In some tales they're considered completely invisible, whereas in others they are very goblin-like in appearance. So yes, that is kind of the second category, the Echechon, or the ethereal kind of fairies. They are very much the spirits of nature, the generic spirits of nature that reside all around the land. They are the physical embodiments of the spirit of the land itself, and of the home, and of the mines, and of the lakes and rivers, and you get the idea. They are the spiritual beings which most witches would probably call upon or ask for help with if you are educated in how they work and the things that offend them and such. So if you're thinking of working with the fairies as a witch, I would say research them as much as possible, and don't do it until you know enough about them, because they are very mischievous beings and they can cause a lot of distress if you don't know what you're doing. Changelings are another huge aspect of Welsh fairy lore. Now, the idea of changelings is very simple, of course. Fairies are obsessed with pretty, beautiful things, and so they would steal pretty, beautiful babies from human parents and replace them with an ugly, horrible fairy child. So the child would look normal at first, but as they developed, they started showing traits that were fairy in nature, such as being really unruly and having a lot of temper tantrums, and maybe becoming really ugly and shouting bad words that they shouldn't know at that age. A lot of people theorize that the belief behind changelings is is a kind of explanation for during the Middle Ages and in times of past, for those who didn't understand certain learning disabilities and such as autism and ADHD. So a lot of people think that possibly what happened was that people would have their children, and as they started developing to show symptoms of ADHD or autism in times when things like that weren't understood as much, instead of thinking, oh, they're just developing differently, people would go, they must be changelings, they must be fairies. So, yeah, I'm not sure where I stand on that. Well, I need to do a bit more research into that. But it's still very interesting that it was such an integral part of Welsh fairy lore. Beyond that, the only other kind of bit of information I really wanted to share with you was that goats are considered fairy creatures, almost, in Welsh folklore. Goats are keepers of arcane occult knowledge, according to Welsh folklore. And the fairies kind of whisper secrets of the universe to them, and then they braid and comb their beards on Friday so that they look smart and presentable for Sunday. And yeah, I just wanted to end the video on that kind of note. So also, as an ending to this video, I know I've kind of rambled through it really quickly. It's a lot of information. Fairies are a huge part of Welsh folklore, and it's a huge part of my practice as a Welsh witch. A lot of this information comes from all sorts of sources. A lot of it comes from actual Welsh folklore. I've read a lot of kind of folk tales and stories and fairy tales to come up with this information, as well as word psychs. So that's one book. I'll put all the books that I've used as sources in the description of this video. Word Sykes' book, British Goblins, is integral if you want to learn more about Welsh fairy lore. Ronald Hutton, his The Witch, talks a little bit about fairy lore and beliefs in Wales. And also just Kristoffer Hughes' book, The Book of Celtic Magic, touches briefly on Genius Loci or the Spirits of Place. And yeah, that's it really. All those will be in the description below, as well as other sources and other books that you could turn to. But I hope this was a brief introduction. I hope I made sense. Like I said, I'm sorry if I rambled on. It's a topic that I find thrilling and intriguing, but of course it's a very complex topic to try and present in a quick video for YouTube, and I'm already at the 20-minute mark of filming, so hopefully this was interesting and intriguing, and you will see more of me now. It's not so hot now, the summer is dying, so I will be making more videos. Catch me soon on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.